Alright, I have big news coming in from Bangladesh amid the violence that's being reported on the streets between the protesters, cops. Has Sheikh Hasina resigned? There is no official confirmation yet. We are not putting out what an official statement is, but this is what Bangladesh media is reporting. Remember, with India, Sheikh Hasina has been a fairly stable Prime Minister with regard to two neighbour nations. What happens here on if this is confirmed? This is absolutely a huge news coming in. Remember, hundreds of people have been killed, many students, many more civilians. Look at the situation on the ground. Cops have been killed, lynched to death by the protesters. But has this really happened? Because the demand was for Sheikh Hasina to step down and resign. But Sheikh Hasina's government maintained that if that happens, there's going to be a full-on instability and that there are some outside forces trying to cause issues, as those who are pro-government had been stating. But now we are told the protests which began late last month, remember it started from Dhaka University. The issue was about a quota system for the veteran families. That needs to end. It needs to at least have a review. But the main demand then it escalated to that Sheikh Hasina as a Prime Minister must resign. And this is after Bangladesh had recently, remember, had elections and Sheikh Hasina had come back to the government. Look at the scenes on the ground. You can see the absolute commotion that had happened. This is in different parts of universities, in other areas. Police stations have been torched, attacked. We saw very gory visuals of even the anti-riot force being attacked. Protesters have been shot dead. Bangladesh media, however, has said that Sheikh Hasina has quit. But I reiterate here, we do not have an official confirmation yet. And this is a big news as much for India. We may be a neighbour nation, so to say, but it is as much important because of the border that we share. And what happens if there is then instability in Bangladesh? And therefore, Sheikh Hasina and Prime Minister Modi have been allies as well, specifically on counter-terror measures. But with Bangladesh, I can tell you that for now, news is coming in that with the demand that there was of Sheikh Hasina to step down as Prime Minister, does that mean that from within the party itself, there could be another Prime Minister that would be now announced? That has that decision already been taken? Or does this mean re-elections? Because recently, remember, 2024 is when Bangladesh had elections which had its own share of controversy, if it was free and fair polling or it was about deliberately to ensure Sheikh Hasina wins. Nevertheless, she had returned to the government, but this is the big news that are coming in. There have been massive attacks that have taken place. The crackdown, the protests, everything has turned violent right now. Look at the visuals speaking for itself. The kind of stone pelting, lynching that's happening, women crying. Cops have been killed as well. Complete commotion and disturbance. Also in the background, remember recently that the government had banned the Jamaat-e-Islami party, stating that it is turned militant and terrorist in nature. But while in January 2024, Sheikh Hasina had won the 4th term for Bangladesh, has it happened that it is not going to be a complete tenure? She was slated to serve another 5 years in office after her party, which is the Awami League, and allies collectively. They had won about over 200 seats out of the 300 parliamentary seats that were contested. Main opposition Bangladesh Nationalist Party, the BNP, had boycotted the elections. But while the BNP had alleged that it was a sham, Sheikh Hasina had returned as elections happened for a 4th term. But now it appears that situation is not looking good. I want to immediately bring in India Today's Shiv Arur on this. Shiv, what are you picking up? This would be absolutely huge if Sheikh Hasina quits, resigns. What are you picking up from what's happening on the ground?
You know, the departure of Sheikh Hasina has been, practically inevitable for the last few weeks already, Pooja. With over 300 people killed in escalating violence and protests, it seemed like Sheikh Hasina was sort of digging in her heels in what began as a kind of quota protest led largely by students, but very rapidly expanding into a kind of 360-degree anti-government movement on the streets of Bangladesh, which had pretty much paralyzed the country entirely. Let's not forget the involvement of international powers, including the United States, to foment unrest in Bangladesh. That's been happening for a very long time. That aspect will be investigated later. But the organic manner in which these protests have turned extremely violent, the fact that Sheikh Hasina made a political faux pas by defending the quotas that have been at the root of these protests, leading to the deaths of more than 300 people, including 62 people in the latest round of violence just a couple of days ago, has basically meant that Sheikh Hasina has nothing left to actually hold on to. Now we understand that the army might be addressing the nation very soon, which could trigger the latest cycle of Bangladesh's descent into military rule once again.
Shiv, what is your assessment vis-a-vis India? Of course, India cannot do much, is not involved in any way, but it's after all our neighbor nation. It's one of the few stable nations as neighbors that we've had, at least with Sheikh Hasina. What happens here on? How do you think India would be, or our establishment would be watching this right now, or what's unfolding in Bangladesh?
For India, this is terrible news, because it basically means that Sheikh Hasina, seen as a good friend of India, someone who's had very close ties with India politically, culturally speaking. The Awami League has historic ties with India, the 1971 war, etc. And the very fact that these protests are essentially against the Awami League, the party of Sheikh Hasina, means that it's trouble for India. This is not something that India can ignore, and India hasn't been ignoring it. Sheikh Hasina's ties with India very much matter at a time like this. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the External Affairs Ministry, how the government actually react to this. There are reports coming in that Sheikh Hasina may have fled Bangladesh. Maybe she's gone to Europe or the United Kingdom. That isn't clear just yet. But the Bangladesh media is reporting that she has either stepped down or fled. And they're also talking very importantly about an army takeover. And in a neighborhood where we are surrounded by trouble, in whichever direction you actually look, this is just the latest chapter of bad regional news for India, Pooja.